Ahoy, e-bike aficionados. We are on a dock near Seattle. What's that city over there? Is that Seattle?
That's Bellevue.
That's Bellevue. Okay, sweet. Well, we were on this bike. This is the Delta X, an adventure bike, possibly a trekking or touring bike. Really just awesome. Totally my type of electric bike because it's super comfortable. It's got the Schwalbe Super Moto-X plus size 2.8 inch wide, 27.5 inch diameter tires. Love that. They give you a lot of stability and cushion, and adding to that is 100mm spring suspension. This is the Suntour XCM. It does have lockout with maybe a little bit of compression adjust and a preload clicker there on the left. I was asking one of the product manager director guys from the company, that's John, asking you a couple questions about this. Whoa boy, we got some we were talking about the suspension fork and I was like, air forks? And you told me.
Yeah, well, basically there aren't a lot of options for high-end forks that have air suspension and fender braze-ons. And for this bike, our keys were we wanted maximum stability.
It's important when you're on the high seas.
It is indeed. Yeah, and fenders are a key. I mean, if you want to ride all in any conditions,
especially in Seattle.
Absolutely.
These are 60mm wide. Speaking of stability, it's holding up pretty well. I love the kickstand that they've got going here. It's well positioned towards the back of the bike, so you're not going to get pedal lock. It's adjustable height. So I kind of extended it just before this ride so the bike would be more upright for the photos. So yeah, I think these are Bikeman fenders. They've got that nice rubber mud flap at the back, 60mm plastic, so they're going to be fairly durable, and they're pretty quiet because they attached a couple places, actually a few places in the rear, maybe 4. And then up front, as John was saying, we've got those braze-ons on the lowers of that suspension fork. And I think you were saying, what is this, like a 32mm stanchion?
So 34mm.
34, yeah, pretty beefy. That's going to give you the extra strength so you aren't getting as much stiction when you're stopping. There is a little bit more weight down here, and in general. This bike is a little bit heavier at about 65 pounds, and I think part of that is because of, boost hub spacing with a through axle up front, 15mm, got the quick release in the rear. This is just a standard 100mm width, so it's not boost, and that's so they can have the NuVinci N380 continuously variable transmission. Those tend to weigh more as well, but you can shift at standstill. This thing is really cool. You do lose a little bit of efficiency compared to a cassette and a derailleur that just like snaps, it's pretty well protected though. So there's no derailleur hanging down. You don't have all the sprockets and stuff. It's all inside, but there is some fluid, and that's what helps it. There's kind of a pivot, some balls that are rotating around this center point, and then there's that pivot point that creates a little bit of a different cadence option. So I like these. One of the other options that I've seen for electric bikes that are supposed to be tough and have some sort of internal gearing system is the roll-off hub, but those tend to be much more expensive, also fairly heavy, and they don't shift under power quite as easily. You have to ease off a little bit more. So I really like that in combination with the BBS02. It's the Bafang mid-drive up there, and this one's rated pretty high, 750 watts up to 1,095 newton meters of torque peak. It uses a cadence sensor versus like a torque sensor or multi-sensor. And I'm kind of mixed on that. It'd be nice if it was like a fancy multi-sensor with shift sensing and everything, but you don't really need the shift sensing because of that internal gearing design back here. And the flip side is you get a throttle, so trigger throttle with full power at your fingertips at any moment, so you can override, assist. I really like that. This bike gives you a lot of options in terms of where you could go, and then the comfort. We were talking about the suspension fork and the bigger tires, but they also have a comfort package with like a suspension seat post from Thudbuster, which is a really neat option. You'll see there's plenty of room here behind the saddle for a trunk bag, maybe some panniers on the sides. They've got some loops for adding bungees and stuff. That's a custom rack. We were talking about it needed to be high enough so that it could fit these, 27.5 plus size tires plus the fender. It needed to be tall enough, and then they kind of adapted it so that it could fit on the more standard 100mm. Just neat to see. And then the chain, you'll notice that there's one sprocket in the rear and a single chain ring, so it's not going to be bouncing up and down a lot, creating noise. It doesn't have to flex as it's going between gears, but they still have a slap guard, so they aren't forgetting about the little details. Again, I think it's kind of impossible to even reach that slap guard, but very cool. This bike is designed around the Delta platform, which is more of it's like a trail bike, cross-country kind
Correct.
of thing.
It's really kind of an off-road focused bike, and this is more of a go anywhere, do anything sort of bike.
So it's really built tough. It's designed initially to handle trails and stuff. but then you've adapted it to be a little bit more efficient for the city. And we were talking about the potential for converting these to tubeless if you wanted, or maybe putting on some knobby tires and using it as just a light trail.
Correct. And actually the genesis of this bike, we had a lot of folks with the original Delta that were converting it to more of a city type bike, and that's what really gave us the inspiration to do this. But you can go back the other way as well. If you want to do some bike packing, something that's a little more off-road, you can also put a more knobby tire in there. You can fit up to about a 2.6 with some knobs, or if you take the fenders off, you can get up to a 3-inch tire on there.
Very cool. And if you did take the fenders off, you could also swap this suspension fork out. So we've got tapered 1.1 to 1.5 headset. So it's not straight. This is mountain bike level stuff. We do have some risers here, 2 10 millimeters and then 2 5 millimeters. It's a fairly upright feel. This is like 18.25 inches on the seat tube right here. It only comes in one size and one color scheme. So we're looking at that like matte black with a little bit of maroon accents. And I like the logos and the iconography. It's nice. This is sporty, but it's not like super flashy. I really appreciate where they've positioned the battery pack here, low and center on the frame, along with the motor. So servicing the wheels is going to be a little bit easier, and then just handling this bike, the weight's right where you want it, and it really frees up that rack for all the cargo you might want to take. There are quite a few, wires, and it's a bit of a mess up here, but that's kind of what you have to go with when you have brakes that have motor inhibitors, a nice color LCD display, and a button pad. That's just a lot. So they've done their best with wire wraps. You might be able to push it back a little bit if you're going to mount like a bag up front, or maybe some other sort of panniers, connectors. I love that they've got an integrated headlight. This is a really fancy, it's kind of like aluminum alloy casing. It does have a cutout on the side so it shines from both sides, not just forward, and it's got a single Cree LED that's super bright. Do you remember the lumens on this?
They published 400 lumens on it.
400 lumens. Yeah, it's very bright. It is mounted to the arch of the suspension, so I was thinking like it might bounce up and down a little bit more versus if it was mounted up here, but then that might limit your options for adding cargo, and with all the wires and stuff, I understand why they did this. If you do want to add extra accessories, like maybe mount your phone for GPS and stuff, you can tap into the battery pack because there's a little USB port down here. It's a full-size USB Type A, 5-volt, 500 milliamp. Again, a phone, maybe an additional light or some speakers or whatever you want. You could set that thing up, tap into the 48-volt, 11.6 amp hour battery pack, which is above average in terms of capacity. And it's unique, like the way they've cut the frame like this, so it sort of fits in. It actually clunks out to the side. It's not one that goes up and down, and there is room for mounting a bottle cage. I actually put that on right before we came here because I have some water, but I took it off so you can see everything up close. If you've seen a BBS02 motor before, a lot of times they hang down low and they kind of sort of thread onto the bottom bracket, and they lower your ground clearance. So I like how EVELO has brought it up a little bit and then encased it in aluminum alloy shielding for protection. You do have some wires and things protruding at the bottom, but that makes them a little bit easier to service. So I just feel like with ground clearance and everything, they've done a good job. I like the VP pedals. They've got these little studs on them. They're wide. They're going to give you good traction. You could upgrade those to like magnesium with adjustable pins, something really fancy, but this is a great place to start. They aren't just cheap like cage style pedals. And then the brakes. When you do have a heavier bike, especially if it's loaded up with gear, especially if you're going faster, this bike can be kind of unlocked to go about 25 miles per hour versus the stock 20. You do want good brakes. So we've got these hydraulic Tektro Riga E-Comp 3-finger levers with the motor inhibitors, hydraulic disc, 180 millimeter front and rear. So pretty good stopping power, and again, motor control, especially with a cadence sensor. It's nice to be able to override that and not have it take off on you if that's not what you're going for. The cockpit's actually, fairly clean. It's got that wider handlebar for that sort of mountain bike feel. I like it. This is the setup that I tend to ride for myself. 31.6 millimeter seat post if you want to do your own suspension post instead of the upgrade that EVELO offers. It's only $200, and they have saddles and a safety upgrade kit and like a commuter upgrade kit. They have just tons of accessories. And then back here for the rear light. So for me, this is kind of it's okay. It's just a 2 AA powered independent light. It's not wired into the main battery like the headlight is. And I asked why they did that, and they said, well, if you run a cable from here, you have to run it through the frame or maybe on the fender, and we just felt like with an adventure bike, we want it to be as durable as possible. And so yeah, it's a little bit of an inconvenience. You have to come back here and press that button to turn it on and off, and then you might forget, and then the batteries could wear out. but whatever, it's just one light, and the headlight is integrated. So I really appreciate that they at least thought about it, and they gave me some feedback. And then up here we do have a plastic chain ring protector, kind of help your pants slough over and maybe not touch the chain, but it's not as gangly and potentially vulnerable as a full chain cover. It would be nice to see an alloy guide, so 2 plates, 1 on each side, but you can see how close the chain is to their little motor cover. I think it's not gonna fall off anyway because it's just a single sprocket in the front and rear. Do you remember the chain ring size on this? It was 46?
Yeah, it's 46 chain ring.
And then in the back, 22?
Is correct, 22.
Okay, so you've got a good range of options for pedaling, and it's a very clean, solid drivetrain. I noticed that I'm raising the seat a little bit more. I usually do that so I can get full leg extension. I'm about 5'9", and I have like a 31-inch inseam, and so I wanted to raise it up. That's one of the limitations here. You could buy a longer seat post if you wanted, but this is a bit more upright for me personally. And that's not such a bad thing, especially if you're doing cross-country riding or something. Do you have anything to add to this? I mean, anything that I'm missing before we jump into the display?
No, I think you pretty much covered it.
We covered it. The battery pack works well. It can be charged on or off the frame, which is really nice, but the charger that they give you, it's a little bit bigger and heavier. It's like 1.6, 1.7 pounds compared to some of the other ones that are like 1.1 pounds. And it only puts out 2 amps versus like 3 or 4 amps on some of the other bikes I've been reviewing lately. It means it's gonna take a little bit longer to fill this up, but maybe it doesn't strain the cells quite as much. And they've got this like fancy proprietary plug design down here that's like a kind of a weird tetrahedral, I don't know, some sort of shape that you won't get it mixed up with the other ones. There's a little power level indicator on it, so you've got some idea of how full it is. I was looking for a USB charging port on it because sometimes their batteries have like a little plug-in, and it wasn't there, so you'd have to plug in here and maybe leave the whole bike on. Just little thoughts, like as I'm thinking about adventuring and what would be a good platform for doing that. I feel like this is one of the few that gives you that continuously variable transmission. It's $39.99, so about $4,000 for this bike. It's one of their more expensive models. And even the chain, a lot of their other bikes now have belt drives, but a chain's gonna be a little bit easier to service on the go if you bring the right parts and stuff. Did you guys think about doing a belt drive for this?
Yeah, so we did. There actually, in part, there were some fitment issues for it, but also, as you mentioned, if you're out, the intended use, people might be doing some adventure riding with it. We wanted to be as bomb-proof and as user-serviceable as possible.
Yeah, and I noticed that while I was pedaling, I actually personally have a full suspension mountain bike, like non-electric, and they had to widen the chain stays a little bit to fit the boost hub spacing in the rear. But because they didn't have to do that here, I'm not getting heel strikes and shoe strikes on that chainstay quite as much. So it's actually a pretty sleek and slim drivetrain. Even though the front is really beefy, it's going to take those hits. And I do want to call out they have 13 gauge spokes on these wheels, so they're a little bit more heavy duty. Does this have a maximum weight rating? Is it similar to the others?
It does. It's 300 pounds.
300 pounds. That's not bad. A lot of other electric bikes I see have like 250. So a little bit extra weight here. We were talking about the rack being 18 kilograms. That's 40 pounds. I've seen racks that are like 55-pound max weight rating, but this one's, it's kind of like spread out and it's a little bit higher, and you'll notice there's some adjustments. So I guess I would sort of keep that in mind. It's nice that there's enough of a triangle here to put like a frame bag, maybe like a sleeping bag or something if you are going to take this on a touring adventure sort of scenario. So yeah, I think what we might do from here is just take this into the shade so you can see the display a little bit easier and go through some of the settings. Sound good?
Sounds good.
And as we head over there, I want to point out, you might see this other bike during the review. This is a prototype that EVELO is working on. I've nicknamed it the Ghost because it's just so fast and sleek, and I like this blue. It's like ectoplasm color kind of. It's got the belt drive we were talking about. It's got the same battery design. Is this a 48 volt 11.6?
So on the prototype it is actually. It's a little bit overvolted and it's pretty fast.
Yeah, it's super fast. It's got a mid-drive. They're just working on some really cool stuff, and the whole gravel grinder concept. So for someone who wants those different like hand positions and stuff, there is another product in the works. But for now, this one, the Delta X is pretty sweet. People are having a pretty good time here at Madrona Beach. Looks like there was some sort of hamburger bun situation going on over here, but we did find some shade. Okay, so to boot this bike up, you hold the little power button right here on the control pad, and it comes to life pretty quickly. It says EVELO. There's even like a little light sensor, so depending on how you set the light up, that's pretty cool. fairly reachable. You do have to reach across the trigger throttle. Cool thing is you could actually remove that if you wanted to and turn this into like a Class 1 electric bike, depending on where you're riding and what rules they have there. The display is adjustable angle, so you can sort of reduce the glare. You'll see we've got a little bit of glare going on, so maybe if I do that, it'll be easier to see. You got the clock at the top left. Battery percentage, really appreciate that. Much more precise than a lot of the infographics you'll see. Even with leaders like Bosch, it's like 5 ticks, and that's 20% increments. It leaves a lot to the imagination. Speed in the middle, so it's in miles per hour right now, but I'll show you how to change to kilometers in a minute. And then on the outer ring, we actually have watts, so you can see how hard the motor is working. And then down here, we've got trip distance. You can cycle through these, though, by pressing a little I button over here. So we'll go from trip distance to odometer, max speed, average speed, range. Range is really cool, because if you click up or down, it goes from 1 to 2. Now we've got 36 miles, 3, 32 miles. So you can see that our range is decreasing the more work that the bike is doing. Of course, the throttle overrides each of these levels of assist as long as you start it first. If you're pedaling, it's kind of limited by whatever assist level, but the throttle gives you override. It's pretty cool. It's going to use a lot more power. I like to use it to get going because my knees are a little bit sensitive and this bike is heavier, but yeah, you're going to drain it faster. So that's back to the range and the battery percentage being very useful. And then you can just arrow down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And interestingly, the throttle is active at assist level 0 on this bike. Some of their other bikes, that's not the case, but John was telling me they have an aftermarket cable, so you could disable that if you wanted to.
That's correct. The user actually has the option to program some things if they purchase that cable, and they can go in and tweak some settings.
Very cool. Do you need a smartphone or a computer, or how does that work?
So Windows-based computer, there's an application that you download. The application is free. You just have to purchase the cable. I believe the cable's about 20 bucks.
Okay, cool. And you know, these guys do have a storefront in Seattle. In Madrona, that's kind of
Correct.
the neighborhood. So it's pretty neat. You could go in, you could test ride this thing and get some help, and you can buy it straight away. Otherwise, you're probably going to be buying this and having it shipped to your house. So there's a big box, a little bit of assembly, not too much. These guys have been in business since 2012, so there's pretty good track record going on, and they've got a lot of the support infrastructure in place, like parts and 2-year comprehensive warranty, really 4 years on almost everything except for the battery pack. Which they do sell separately. After 2 years, they'll give you sort of a prorated price on the battery if you need a new one. So that's cool, but just keep in mind there's a little bit more doing and like elbow grease involved with an online bike like this. So yeah, coming back to the display, that's pretty much everything. If we click I one more time, we go to calories, time, that's like ride time, and then we're back to trip. So we just mentioned all these different settings and things, and there's quite a bit you can do with this display. If you double tap that I button, okay, cool, and it says display settings. Now we can go in and change the units like we were talking about, the brightness, automatic off, maximum power assist, so we could change that to like, 9 levels instead of 5 if we wanted, or 3. So there's a few different choices there. Power view, that's different readouts and menus. State of charge view, trip reset, wheel size, we're at 27 inches, that's perfect. Speed limit, 30 miles per hour. So, as I mentioned, maybe, what is the top speed on this bike if you...
So the top speed, it's a pretty quick bike. It depends on the rider weight, the conditions, but up to about 30 miles an hour.
For real? Wow.
Yeah, obviously the faster you go, the more you'll be eating into the battery life.
And that's back to this being like kind of the higher powered BBS02, rated at 750 nominal, 95 Newton meters of torque. That's pretty cool for people who are really trying to go the distance, or maybe trying to get to work fast or something. So we go down here. So we talked about the speed limit. AL sensitivity, what does that stand for?
Ambient light sensor. Sorry.
Ambient light sensor.
For the light sensor.
There we go. Password, so you can sort of lock the display off if you want. Set the clock and back, and then there's some information, so you could get some battery feedback, maybe if they're honoring your warranty, checking out error codes. I think that's about it. Yeah, it's a pretty good overview of the control system. Maybe we should just hop on this thing and go for a ride. Yeah, see here, it's got that cool like that Nate.
Oh man, is there like a helmet hookup or something like that?
They have ones where you can have like goggles on and you can see what's going on, but this one's got a little lens in the back. Isn't that cool?
Oh man, yeah, because I got a Canon camera, so can it hook up to those?
Yeah, some of them they have like a bracket so it can hold your phone, or a different camera, like a tripod mount.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you. We're gonna take off, but Have a great day, dude.
You too, bro. Thank
And
you,
you're going to
man.
be famous now.
You go.
You're going to be a YouTube sensation.
Right.
Thank you, man.
Okay, we're gonna trade off. John's gonna hop on the Delta X, get some third-person shots. I'd like to go on your right at first and then around you just to see the whole thing, like the drivetrain and stuff.
Sure, let's go for it.
Sweet, and I'm on the super secret, what I'm referring to as the Ghost, like gravel bike. There he comes. Sweet hill right here. Definitely nice to have those hydraulic disc brakes. This bike's surprisingly comfortable. You know, you look at the narrower tires and stuff, but with the Delta X, you've got those plus size 2.8-inch tires. They give you a lot more stability and vibration dampening. Plus, you've got suspension. I don't think I've ever seen a gravel bike with a belt drive like this before. It's super quiet with the Fang Max drive. It's got like that really fluid torque sensor. Well, buddy, I think you beat me down that one.
Yeah.
Very
Maybe
nice.
next time.
Yeah. Nice. Even in the daylight, that one Cree LED is really showing up. Very nice. Looking good, dude. Okay guys, the beach we were at is just right down there, and we've got ourselves a hill. We're in Seattle, so there's quite a few. I'm gonna hop on this thing and just, you know, show you the drivetrain, give you some feedback on how it feels to pedal. As mentioned earlier, I do have this 350mm seat post raised, basically as high as it can go, so I'm gonna get full leg extension. And in this position, it feels pretty good. So here we go, I'm just gonna throttle it. Go, and we're in kind of a medium gear, and it's doing fine. You know, this could, especially if you were a heavier, you could drop it down to a lower, easier gear. You just wouldn't go as fast. So to be able to ascend a hill like this without pedaling, pretty awesome. Yeah, not bad. I'm gonna do some help out a little bit, and I can see that green outline of power. It drops a little bit when I'm helping. Just a little bit of delay on that motor cutout. Again, it is using a cadence sensor, so sort of listening. There are the 12 magnets inside, and there's like 5 degrees of rotation that pedal has to go for it to respond. But it works pretty well. There's the little gear shifter kind of thing. So there's just an infographic that shows a little dude climbing a hill. You can see my cadence really picked up because this is a low gear. And then if I flatten the hill, got that really slow cadence, and then the motor's going to be working really hard to help us climb. But we'll be able to reach a higher top speed. Looks like we got John in the background keeping up. Looking good, dude. Okay guys, we're on some packed earth and grass, and I just wanted to ride around and you can listen to that motor, how responsive it is. I'm going to start off in pedal assist level 5 so you can see how quickly it goes, and then also how loud it is, as well as the fenders and just everything kind of rattling around. There's really no accessories on it besides my bottle cage right now, so should be pretty accurate. actually feels pretty good. And then with those brake levers, anytime you pull them, the motor cuts out. So it's, you know, it's confidence inspiring. Very nice. Now I'm gonna hop on the road and go a little bit faster, use the throttle. Lead on. Very nice. The brakes feel good. There's a little bit of dive if you don't have the fork locked out, but it's kind of what I would expect. And it feels lighter than it is because the motor is just very zippy. You can technically shift while you're pedaling, even when it's under power. You don't have to worry about grinding the gears or anything because it's all internal. But sometimes it's harder if you're really applying a lot of, you know, motor power to the drivetrain. So I don't know. I kind of ease off a little bit. And then shifting at standstill is really easy. You might see the little wire going back and forth. That's what does the shifting there. Well guys, I think that's about it. I've had a ton of fun looking at this bike. That's the Delta X. Really neat that they listened to customers and then built something with all the right, you know, fenders and racks and stuff that works, especially for a bike that has unique hub spacing in the rear and then the big plus size tires and stuff. I feel like this works really well. It's quiet, it's powerful, it gives you kind of everything you'd want for doing a bit of adventure riding. The only trade-off being the motor sensor is a cadence sensor, so it's just not quite as natural and fluid as a torque sensor. But gosh, you know, the motor is pretty quiet. It seems well protected there in the bottom bracket. It looks good. You've got that ground clearance. For the full written review on the EVELO Delta X, I'll see you back at ElectricBikeReview.com. I've reviewed a bunch of other EVELO products and then some other adventure bikes, so you can compare them back to back if you click the little button, you know, comment in the forums and stuff. Have fun out there, and whatever you do, ride safe.